Muito boa tarde. Eu começo por falar em português e depois, se me derem autorização, passarei para inglês para fazer a apresentação que gostaria de partilhar convosco. Começaria por agradecer ao ISCTE a amabilidade do convite, que muito me honrou. É um enorme prazer estar aqui e foi também um grande prazer participar neste programa. E gostaria em particular de felicitar o Gonçalo e a Catarina, não sei onde é que está, pela magnífica organização que eu tive a oportunidade de presenciar. Não é frequente sentir no nosso país o entusiasmo, a dinâmica, a comunidade de empreendedorismo que eu pude sentir ao longo deste programa. E foi sinceramente uma boa dose de ar fresco que eu tive a oportunidade de respirar durante o pouco tempo que tive a oportunidade de conviver com o Gonçalo, com a Catarina, enfim, com todos aqueles que fizeram este programa. E agora, se me permitem, eu passaria para inglês. I believe that all of you who have entered this venture competition came with a dream to build a company, to take your life into your hands, grow the company fast, achieve worldwide recognition, eventually market leadership, attract financing, and hopefully provide good returns for those who have trusted you to invest their money and gain some financial independence, financial rewards. With the dream, of course, comes uncertainty. Uncertainty about the unknown, uncertainty about the future. And you are frightened. And I'm sure that all of you ask yourselves, can I do it? And my answer to all of you is absolutely, you can. Because as you will see, this is all about people. It's all about people. Forget business plans. The most important thing to do and to succeed, it's a number of attributes that lie in people. A purpose for what we do. A good idea, if possible, a great one. World-class knowledge and talent. Passion, commitment, resilience, accountability, loyalty, support, and luck. Now, let me take you through my experience for about 10 years. I'll go very quickly to the story of Cheap Idea, and then I will focus on three important aspects of this story. The purpose of the project and of our dream, the people, the capital, and then I will share with you what I'm particularly proud of to leave behind. And just to conclude, I'd like to share you some metrics. We lack metrics. We lack quantified objectives for what we want to do, for what we want our future to be. And I will share with you some metrics so that you can think about them and see how you want to shape our future together. Back in 1997, we had hurdles and a sense of urgency, as all of you will have. But we have very specific hurdles that, fortunately, do not exist today. We had to face and overcome ignorance and even hostility, cultural, political, institutional hostility. It was outrageous to see a university professor do what we really wanted to do. And you will understand why we wanted to do that. In 13 years, things have changed dramatically for the better. Today, entrepreneurship is shared, is supported, is promoted. There is an environment that stimulates people to think about entrepreneurship. There are instruments. Many things have changed. None of them we had back in 1997. But today, as in 1997, we had, and you will have, to race against the clock. We were able to instill a sense of urgency in people, in the company, fundamentally for two important reasons. First of all, to overcome the garage operation sentiment that is not sustainable over the long term, especially with young people, and therefore create critical mass for stability. For us, it was like knowing that we had started a sprint, but we had to run a marathon. And the only thing that we knew is that we had to run as fast as we could and to go as far as we could. But to be honest, we didn't even know how far we could go. When we started, we had everything that none of you wants to have. We had virtually nothing. We had to build the organization from ground zero. We had no industrial experience. We could not hire industrial experienced professionals because there was not such an industry in Portugal. We had no industrial management experience. We had no credibility in the world where we knew that we had to find our way. We had, as unfortunately we still have today, an unfavorable image of a country that does not help. We had no capital. We started with about 12,500 euros. And to be honest, no way we could raise capital at the beginning. But we have the most important things that I talked about before. We had full commitment for a mission of a lifetime. We had a strong team and bulletproof loyalty. We had the capability to work very, very hard, beyond everything that you can imagine. We were prepared to make countless sacrifices, and we had outstanding family support. And we had a winning culture that grew with the company. Let me very quickly go through the idea for Cheap Idea. We did not have a product idea, but we had a very simple idea based on people. Back in the 80s, with the invention of the personal computer, everybody thought that the world was going to be digital. It was the age of the emergence of the digital revolution. And all over the world, the education of electronic engineers that existed before digital engineers came in started to be de-emphasized. But somehow we believed in the strategic value of analog technology for reasons that you'll see in a minute. And therefore, for us, the perceived lack of analog engineering talent in the world create the opportunity to establish a company based on that very simple people idea. And our assumption was as simple as this. If we would be able to develop a competent, internationally competitive group of analog electronic engineers, then we will surely be able to find work in the world and do it out of Portugal. We had no idea where in the world. We simply believed that we would be able to find it. Now, in the 90s came the revolution of digital consumer electronics that is part of our lives. Who among us is able to live today without any of these gadgets? Gadgets for communications, gadgets for imaging, gadgets for computing, gadgets for multimedia. Now, if you think for a moment, what do they have all in common? And this is the most technical slide that I will show here. They have all, with no exception, they have a digital engine. They have powerful computers inside that process abstract information, which is digital information. But all of them have to interact with the world, with us, and with the world. And the world is analog. The nature is analog. And all of them need some form of connectivity to the world. Wireless connectivity for the radios, human interfaces to play with the gadgets, power management to manage the energy necessary for the gadgets, and wired connectivity when you connect a USB cable or an HDMI cable. And this was the space that was behind our vision, because the key technology in all these four main areas of connectivity is analog connectivity. And that was our vision. Now, alongside with that, something happened in the industry, and we were aware of that. And you have to be aware of the dynamics of industry, as we'll see later. The semiconductor industry is the most innovative industry in the world. It consumes about 18% on average of revenue for investment in R&D, far more than any other industry that you can think of, including pharmaceuticals. It's an industry that has had a dynamics of development unseen in any other industry. And the value chain of this industry over the years, in a period of 30, 40 years, has completely disintegrated. 30, 40 years ago, the companies in this industry were monolithic, vertically integrated companies, and over the years they have been disintegrated in layers of increasingly specialized knowledge. And that knowledge came to people. The segment of IP designers, this is nothing but people. There are no fabs to build, there is no inventory to manage, there is no operations to manage for outsourcing manufacturing. Nothing, it's people, it's the knowledge of the people. We understood that, and in effect, we were pioneers of this industry worldwide without knowing. Then is history. We grew the business over 10 years, about 40% compound annual growth rate. We gained market share and achieved market leadership in 2004 and increased that leadership in the subsequent years. We grew our strategic assets, people. We increased in 7 years, we increased people 7 times. And that brings me to the first reflection that I would like to share with you. And this reflection about the dynamics of global industries. Do we really understand global forces that drive disintegration of value chains and the creation of virtual new ones, because the value chain has to be recreated, not in a vertical monolithic form, but somehow? Do we understand and foresee shifts from capital-intense to human capital-intense industry? In this context, are we able to determine what are the strategic assets that we have or should develop to play the game in the global economy? We came to understand all this in the context of our industry, and we came to be able to define the strategic assets that we needed, and those were people. Now, let me come to the purpose of Chip Idea. For this, I have to go a little bit back to 1985 when I came back to Portugal soon after I finished my PhD at Imperial College in London. And I started as any university professor starts. Attract students, develop a framework of relevant undergraduate and graduate education, be scientifically active, productive, gain visibility and recognition by our peers, establish stable funding channels, abroad because I could not get money in Portugal, and develop international networks both in academia and industry. In all we did, our references were abroad. We wanted to be among the best. And for that, we need to have the references of the best. And they are in the world. Then came frustration. We felt increasingly disconnected from the country for the simple reason there was no industry. We felt that the knowledge that we were creating could not flow into the economic fabric. We became increasingly concerned with our students because of the lack of attractive, technically stimulating professional environment to absorb them. And above all, we thought that this was a totally unacceptable waste of valuable human capital and money. I cared, and I wanted to find a solution. First of all, after resisting resignation. Then I looked for solutions. The first one and the obvious one was to use my network of industrial contacts in the world to open up windows of opportunities for the students who wanted to go abroad and use their knowledge in a relevant industry. Obviously, for obvious reasons, this is not acceptable. It's a short-term solution. Then I took the next step to look for the next solution, and that was to try and attract multinationals to come and invest in Portugal and set up a design center in Portugal. This was very close to happen back in 1996. Very, very close to happen. And if that has happened, Cheap Idea would not have existed. But that did not happen. And then was when we decided to take the solution in our hands and do it yourself. So the purpose of Cheap Idea, it was really a mission to set up in Portugal a new industry that could professionally absorb students as well as the economically relevant knowledge they were developing at university. And that brings me to the second reflection. Portugal has already a reasonable level of public expenditure in R&D as a percentage of GDP. But we should ask questions. We should ask, is the knowledge that is created economically relevant? We are not talking about diplomas. We do not live in a diploma economy. We live in a knowledge economy. Where does that knowledge go to? Is it a strategic instrument for capturing direct foreign investment? We should ask all these questions. And to me, none of these questions is satisfactorily answered. So we should ask, what was the purpose, or what is the purpose of sustaining public expenditure in R&D? If we live in a knowledge economy, how do we bring knowledge to the economy? This was the reason that led us to create a new industry in Portugal, and the Cheap Idea project was the mission to create an industry that did not exist, to absorb the knowledge that was economically relevant in the world, but not in Portugal, that was developed by my students at university. Then the people. 3 years after start, the bottleneck. The company was growing very fast. We saw large market potential to accelerate growth, but we could not recruit engineers in Portugal. Lisbon, not even Portugal alone, could sustain our needs for manpower development. So 2 things happen here. Either you don't develop because you cannot grow headcount, and sooner or later you are probably dead, especially in an industry like the semiconductor industry, or we have to do something that is not easy. You have to grow abroad to capture talent. And that's what we did. That was not an option, never an option. It was a strategic necessity. Setting up global operations in a highly competitive industry is not a free lunch. There are significant high risks. There are significant high costs. This is never an option. Brainpower was our sole strategic necessity to go abroad. Not to sell, because we were selling worldwide, but to set up engineering centers that could capture people abroad. We did that simply because we could not find them in Portugal. And then we grew a very wide network organization. In 2001, we set up a center in Porto, because we could not bring people from the Faculty of Engineering of the University of Porto to Lisbon. Portugal is rigid, there is no mobility, so they could not come to us, and we went close to their back door. Then we set up a center in Poland, and we were pioneers in Poland in the industry. Then we went to Macau, and we were pioneers in Macau in this industry. Then we went to Leuven, to the heart of the semiconductor industry in Europe. It was the first time that we were not pioneers, and we were able to recruit people from the European semiconductor industry in Central Europe. And then later on, we went to Suzhou, about 100 kilometers west of Shanghai. And later, in 2007, we went to northwest of France to come. In the middle, we grew our organization by acquisitions. Back in 2005, we acquired strategic assets, no people in the US, they are expensive. And then in 2007, at the beginning of 2007, we acquired the team and their assets, technology assets in Norway. That brings me to reflection number 3. For years, I have tried to raise the red flag for the lack of engineers, electronic engineers in Portugal. Actually, not only electronic engineers in general. They did not exist locally, and we could not import them. Maybe things have changed. I have not seen that. So the really absurd mismatch, or maybe even deadly mismatch that we see today in Portugal, is that we have tens of thousands of young graduates. But not only graduates with the first level of university education, with masters, with PhDs, that are unemployed, and we see companies that are not able to find graduates to employ. I don't have data, I don't even know how to calculate, but I do believe that it costs a significant amount of GDP growth to our gross domestic product, the lack of skilled and qualified human capital that is needed to sustain the development of competitiveness of global high-tech companies. I do believe that. I have seen many business plans. They are all great. I cannot believe that you will be able to build a 300 million euro company with 10 people. And the key issue of organizational development and people, recruiting, in my personal view and from my experience, has been highly neglected. Now let me go to capital. We had good and bad experiences with capital. Let me start with good ones. The good ones is that we started with 12,000 euros, and for 5 years, we were able to grow the company out of the cash flow that the company was generating. We were lucky. We had an international industrial partner that needed us. We understood that. We grabbed the opportunity, and we used that to grow the company. We eventually brought on board venture capital and 25 million euros with them, especially to fund and support the need to go abroad and set up infrastructures abroad. All the investments came from private VC funds, 40% national money and 60% international money. Back in 1997, I tried, but I always failed, to approach government agencies that are supposed to exist to support and provide some assistance to this kind of ventures. I can tell you that all my efforts were really painful and eventually failed. But that was not all. As any company, we need credit. I mean, we need working capital. for our daily operations. And we got all that from banks. We never asked too much. But all the credit facilities that we were able to get from banks, all of them, with no exception, had behind personal guarantees. And I believe that altogether in excess of 3 million euros. I mean, if things had not turned reasonably well as they have, we would have to sell our assets, our homes, nothing else, and probably would have to keep working to the rest of our lives to pay the debt to the banks. When international VCs came on board in 2005, they were shocked with this. Because in their world, in their experiences, they have never seen founders backing to the level that we have backed all the working financial needs of the company. We were lucky. And we had very understanding wives and families. Now, that brings me to reflection number 4. In my view, and to be honest, I don't know too much. I try to follow up and understand what's going on. But in my view, the national venture capital industry is still largely fragmented in size. Pockets of funds, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, many of them. I guess there is no university today in Portugal that it does not have its little fund of 1 million or 2 million. And most of what I know is not knowledgeable about high technology domains. And we should ask, because public money is not public, it's private, it's our money. We should ask what is the role of public VC funds. We should ask if public VC funds have a strategy, and if they have an anchoring role in setting up the infrastructures for a more modern Portugal. And of course, we should ask, how about being able to leverage national funds with international funds? This is not companies, as Cheap Idea and others, exceptions, that have been able to attract international VCs by the founders, not by the national VCs. This is about having the national funds open up to international capital and increasing the amount of capital available to finance what needs to be financed. Now, I'm getting to the end. What do we leave behind? Today, so Cheap Idea was acquired in 2007, about 3 years ago. And then about a year and a half ago, it changed hands and it was acquired by Synopsys. Synopsys is a 1.3 billion EDA company, US-based, and today Portugal is the base of the largest R&D center outside US in analog and connectivity IP. This is the Cheap Idea base. Back in 2002, another American company, Integration Associates, set up another company in Portugal, Design Center, and obviously, because they didn't have people to recruit, they came to Cheap Idea and they took engineers. It's natural. It's part of the game. Then in 2003, some former Cheap Idea engineers and actually some of my former students also created a startup at Universidade Nova, and that startup was eventually acquired by an Irish company, S3. Back in 2007, NXP, which is the former Philips Semiconductors business group, also set up a design center in Portugal, and obviously they started out with Cheap Idea engineers because they did not want to take the burden and recruiting very young people from the universities with no experience, and they rather prefer to take what existed with some experience in Portugal. Now, besides Portugal, there is a spin-off of Cheap Idea in Brazil, created by a Brazilian engineer that spent 3 years here in Portugal. There is a spin-off in France, created by the team that was Cheap Idea team in Cannes. And there is a spin-off in China, created by the team that was part of the Chip Idea Center in Suzhou. So what is important and what is especially important for me is that the mission that really drove us to start Chip Idea, and remember that mission was to create a new knowledge industry in Portugal to absorb students with relevant economic knowledge, has left its roots, and the tree is growing. And hopefully, the tree will keep growing. Now, the metrics. From MIT. I've seen recently numbers regarding the number of companies, active companies today, that have been created by MIT alumni. I'd like to draw your attention to three specific elements of the metrics. Number of companies, sales per company, and sales per employee. These are the three metrics that are important. Now, in this universe, there are about 26,000 companies that have today about 3.3 million employees, generate annual turnover worldwide of about $2 trillion. The average, obviously, there is a huge variance, but the average is about 127 employees per company, about $77 million of sales per company, and about $600,000 of sales per employee. If we split this universe into groups, the group of the huge companies responsible for about 3% of the total universe, but generate about 1.6 trillion, so about 80% of the total revenue. They employ 2.3 million people. On average, they have about 3,000 employees per company. On average, about $2 billion per company. On average, about $700,000 per company. Now, the other companies is a bigger universe, 25,000. They have a total annual turnover of about $400 billion, about, on average, 39 employees per company, $16 million on average sales per company, and about $400,000 sales per employee. I was not aware of the ISCTE numbers that we have seen before. I was simply aware of Pedro Nunes, and I do believe that Pedro Nunes, the incubator Pedro Nunes, has done over the years a very serious committed work to support and stimulate entrepreneurship. And these numbers I have seen recently, a few months ago. In 20 years, they have been able to create 120 companies. They employ 1,200 people. Total sales of this group of companies about 70 million euros. The average number of employees per company is about 10. The average sales per company is about €500,000 and the average sales per employee is about 58,000 euros. Now, Chip Idea. In 10 years, we were able to create a company with 300 people, 97% with university degrees and 15% with PhD degrees and about 40% with master degrees. We had, at the end of 2007, we had about 30 million euros of revenue, on average about 100,000 euros per employee, and we were able to raise about 25 million euros of VC funding. Now, if you ask me what are our objectives for the next 10 years, I don't know. Does anyone know? I've never heard them. And I mean, not having quantified objectives is the best way of stimulating an accountability. Because whatever you do, you did right. You did not have an objective to achieve. You do a lot, you do nothing, you do right. Now, I have a dream. I would like to see in the next 10 years 100 technology-based companies flourishing in Portugal. I don't know which sectors, but we should know. Because that means that we should manage the availability of resources and the steering of resources to where they are needed. It could be in semiconductors, it could be in electronics, biotechnology, healthcare, materials, energy, information technology, communication. I don't know. Someone should make an effort to try and know. Now, if each one, on average, these companies generate 10 million euros of revenue per year, a lot more than our current metrics. The metrics that I have is Pedro Nunes, a lot less than MIT, but even less than what we did at Cheap Idea. That would mean about 1 billion euros of turnover. Assuming that these companies are born to be global, today that represents about 3% of our exports. Most important what it represents today, it is certainly a driver of very strong and fast growth for the future. Let's assume that on average, each company would need about 100 people. We needed 300. That means about 10,000 qualified people, highly qualified people. Let's imagine that on average they would need about 10 million euros of financing, venture capital. We needed 25, I'm putting the threshold below. That means about 1 billion euros of venture capital. Now, I know what you may be thinking. This guy is crazy. We don't have nothing of that. Because we don't have 10,000 qualified people to go into new companies, besides the ones that exist that also need people. We don't have them. We don't have 1 billion euros of venture capital, so this is impossible. But our option is the following. If we set up this objective, then we know what we have to do. And we have to work hard to make it happen. Now, if we don't want to work hard to make it happen, then we should say what we have. Can we produce 1,000 people? Do we have available 100 million euros? Then we cannot have 100 companies. Competitive, globally competitive, growing fast. Maybe we have 10. For sure, we cannot have these companies with €500,000 funding or 1 million euros funding. Forget it. Forget it. Now, I personally think that all this is a dream worth living. But to live a dream, you have to have one. And I think it's important and it's worthwhile to have one. Thank you very much for your attention.